This is the story they never told you. The real one. The oldest painting of Orpheus in the underworld is missing someone. There is no Eurydice. She was added centuries later. The original story was not about love at all. It was about something else. So let us begin with what you already know, or what you think you know. Orpheus was the greatest musician who ever lived. His mother was Calliope, chief among the 9 muses. His father, depending on who tells the story, was either Eurydice, a Thracian king, or Apollo himself. Either way, the god of music gave the boy a lyre. And when Orpheus played it, the world listened. Not just people. Animals would stop mid-hunt. Rivers would slow their currents. Trees would uproot themselves and lean closer, as if drawn by something they could not name. He was, in every sense, a man whose voice could bend reality. And then he fell in love. Her name was Eurydice. They were married in a meadow, and the god of marriage, Hymenaeus, came to bless the union. But his torch would not hold a steady flame. It sputtered. It smoked. It made the eyes water. In the ancient world, this was not a minor inconvenience. It was a terrible omen. On the day of the wedding, Eurydice walked through the grass with her companions, a group of nymphs. A serpent struck her ankle. She died almost immediately. Orpheus did what no mortal had ever done. He walked into the underworld alive. He entered through Taenarus, a cave at the southern tip of Greece believed to be one of the gates to the land of the dead. He carried nothing but his lyre. First he met Charon, the ferryman who carries the dead across the river Styx. Charon did not turn him away. He could not. The music would not let him. Then Cerberus, the 3-headed hound that guards the gates of the dead, lowered all 3 of its heads and let him pass. And then something happened that had never happened before. The damned stopped suffering. Tantalus, cursed to stand in water that receded every time he bent to drink, forgot his thirst. Ixion, bound to a spinning wheel of fire for eternity, felt the wheel go still. The daughters of Danaus stopped filling their bottomless urns. Sisyphus, who had rolled his boulder up a hill only to watch it roll back down for all of time, simply sat on the stone and listened. The Furies wept. For the first time in their existence, they wept. Orpheus stood before Hades and Persephone, the king and queen of the dead, and made his case. He did not threaten. He did not bargain. He argued that love was a god known even in the underworld. After all, had love not brought Hades and Persephone together? They agreed to release Eurydice on one condition. He must walk ahead of her, back toward the surface, and he must not look back until they had both reached the upper world. He climbed. She followed. He could hear nothing behind him. No footsteps, no breathing, just silence. They were almost there. He could see the light of the surface world ahead. And he turned around. Virgil called it a sudden madness seized by reckless loving. A pardonable offense, he wrote, if the spirits knew how to pardon. Eurydice was snatched back into the dark. She whispered a faint farewell, and then she was gone. Orpheus ran back to the riverbank. He begged Charon to let him cross again. Charon refused. For 7 days, Orpheus sat on the bank of the Styx, weeping, eating nothing, playing nothing. That is the story you were told. But here is the problem. It might not be the original story at all. What do you mean, not the original? Fair question. Let's look at the evidence. In the 5th century BCE, a painter named Polygnotus created a massive mural at the temple of Apollo in Delphi. It depicted the underworld, souls of the dead, rivers of forgetting, and there among the shades stood Orpheus, playing his lyre. But Eurydice was nowhere in the painting. The Greek travel writer Pausanias described this mural in detail. He cataloged every figure. Orpheus was there. His wife was not. This is the earliest visual depiction of Orpheus in the underworld we have. And the woman at the center of his story simply does not appear. Now consider Plato. In the Symposium, written sometime between 385 and 370 BC, the character Phaedrus brings up Orpheus, but not as a hero, not as a devoted husband. Phaedrus calls him a coward. Think about that. The greatest love story in Greek mythology. And one of the most important philosophers in Western history looked at it and said, no, This man was not brave. He did not die for love the way Alcestis did. Instead, he tried to cheat death. He entered the underworld alive, playing tricks with his music, trying to get something for nothing. And the gods saw through it. According to Plato's version, they did not return Eurydice at all. They gave Orpheus a phantom, an illusion, a punishment disguised as a gift. He walked out of the underworld thinking he had won. He had won nothing. This is not a footnote. This is Plato, and his version does not treat Orpheus as a romantic hero. It treats him as a cautionary tale about cowardice. So what happened? How did the coward become the greatest lover in mythology? Centuries happened. Eurydice only receives her full role in the story with Virgil around 29 BCE and then Ovid around 8 CE. That is a gap of 300 to 400 years between Plato and the version you know. And even then, Virgil and Ovid cannot agree. Virgil blames a man named Aristeus for Eurydice's death. Ovid never mentions him. Virgil ends the story with permanent separation. Ovid reunites them in the Elysian fields. Different authors, different centuries, different Eurydices. Imagine discovering that Romeo was a real historical figure. But Juliet was invented 400 years later by a playwright who needed a better story. That is essentially what happened here. The woman whose death launched the most famous descent into the underworld may not have been part of that story at all. Even her name feels constructed. Eurydice, from the Greek euris, meaning wide, and dike, meaning justice. Wide justice is less a name and more a concept. A placeholder for something the story needed but did not originally have. So if the original myth was not about rescuing a dead wife, what was it actually about? Who was Orpheus before he was a lover? Before Orpheus was a heartbroken husband, he was something closer to a prophet, a man who knew the secrets of death because he had already been there. Scholars have traced Orpheus back further than the Greek gods themselves. His roots lie in Thrace, the wild northern frontier of the Greek world. And the traditions of Thrace look nothing like Olympian religion. They look like shamanism. Travel between the world of the living and the world of the dead. Power over nature through song. Death by dismemberment. These are Central Asian shamanic motifs that predate classical civilization by centuries. Orpheus fits every one of them. He was not a lover on a rescue mission. He was a shaman who walked between worlds. And the Greeks knew it. In the Argonautica, when Jason assembled the greatest heroes in Greece to sail for the Golden Fleece, the centaur Chiron gave him a warning. You cannot pass the Sirens without Orpheus. Not Heracles, not Castor and Pollux. Orpheus. When the Argo reached the Sirens' island, Orpheus lifted his lyre and played over them. He did not block the sound. He overpowered it. His music swallowed theirs. Every sailor survived, except one. A man named Butes leaped overboard, pulled by the Sirens' call. Aphrodite had to rescue him from the sea. But here is where the story gets stranger. Orpheus did not just perform miracles. He founded a religion. Orphism taught something no mainstream Greek religion dared to say. The soul is immortal. It is trapped in a cycle of death and rebirth. And there is a way out. The Orphic creation story begins before the gods. Kronos, time itself, and Ananke, necessity, coiled together around a vast cosmic egg. From that egg emerged Fans, the firstborn, a radiant being who set creation into motion. This is not Zeus throwing lightning bolts. This is something far older and far stranger. Then comes the myth of Zagreus. Zeus fathered a child with Persephone. The Titans, sent by a jealous Hera, tricked the infant with a mirror and toys. While the child stared at his own reflection, they seized him, tore him apart, consumed him. Zeus destroyed the Titans with lightning. From their ashes, humanity was born. Every human carrying two natures. A divine spark from Zagreus. A sinful stain from the Titans. People believed this enough to be buried with it. Archaeologists have found thin gold tablets in graves across southern Italy, Crete, and Thessaly, dating from the 5th century BCE, each inscribed with instructions for the dead. Directions for navigating the underworld. What to say, which path to take. And in 1962, Near Thessaloniki, inside a funeral pyre, researchers discovered the Derveni papyrus. Late 5th century BCE, the oldest surviving manuscript in all of Europe. A commentary on Orphic theology. This is not myth. This is archaeology. Physical evidence that people lived and died by what Orpheus taught. So this is the older Orpheus. A shaman, a prophet, a founder of mysteries, not a lover. But then someone decided to rewrite him. And what they added changed everything. So why did they add her? Because love is the one door everyone knows how to open. The older Orpheus was powerful but remote. A religious figure. A cosmic theologian. You do not weep for a theologian, but a man who walks into hell for the woman he loves and loses her because he could not stop himself from turning around. That you feel in your chest. Virgil understood this. Around 29 BCE, he embedded the love story into his Georgics, a poem about farming, about bees. He placed Orpheus alongside a man named Aristeus, a beekeeper, a pragmatist who lost his hives and performed the correct rituals to get them back. Aristeus did everything right and was rewarded. Orpheus did everything right except for one moment and lost everything. But here is where the story takes its cruelest turn. Aristeus was the one who chased Eurydice through the meadow. She fled, stepped on the serpent, and died. And Aristeus was also a son of Apollo. The man who caused Eurydice's death was Orpheus's own half-brother. The pragmatist destroys the artist. And from death, new life. Bees born from the carcass of a dead bull. The entire cycle turns on sacrifice. Now, does knowing the love story was added later weaken it? It makes it more powerful, because every generation chose to keep the version with Eurydice. They did not have to. They chose to. Monteverdi chose it in 1607 when he composed L'Orfeo, the first great opera. Over 70 operas have retold this myth since. The story about music's power gave birth to the supreme art form of music itself. Rilke chose it in 1904. In his poem, Eurydice has been so transformed by death that when she learns Orpheus has turned around, she simply asks, "Who?" Black Orpheus chose it in 1959. Palme d'Or, Academy Award. Portrait of a Lady on Fire reframed the backward glance as a decision. Not the lover's choice, the poet's choice. And in 2019, Hadestown opened on Broadway. It tells the story knowing the audience already knows the ending. Its question is not whether Orpheus will succeed. It asks, why do we keep singing this sad song? 8 Tony Awards. No answer. Because the answer is the telling itself. That is why they rewrote him. Not because the original was wrong, but because the rewrite was irresistible. The Maenads tore him apart. The followers of Dionysus ripped Orpheus limb from limb. But they could not silence him. His severed head and his lyre fell into the river Hebrus. And as they floated toward the sea, the head kept singing. It washed ashore on Lesbos. There became an oracle so powerful it rivaled Delphi, until Apollo, god of music, god of prophecy, commanded it to stop. A father silencing his own son's voice. Lesbos, the same island where Sappho would later live and write. Ancient writers believed the island's gift for poetry flowed from that singing head buried in its soil. The gods placed his lyre among the stars. The constellation Lyra, its brightest star, Vega, has been burning for 450 million years. And Ovid gave him one final gift. In the underworld, Orpheus finds Eurydice again. They walk together through the Elysian fields. And now, at last, he can look back at her as often as he likes. Think about that for a moment.